Sunday morning with Joe Rayo and Joe Cioffi on the Joe and Joe Weather Show. We've got a coastal storm that is brushing, or brushes, eastern New England. We're going to talk about that. Pretty impressive, actually, on the satellite loop this morning. And we have a winter storm going on in the west as the latest of storms coming into California moves its way into the Rockies. But the rest of the country, at least for now, is fairly quiet. We will be looking at all of this and the long range coming right up. And the Joe and Joe Weather Show is brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York, in southwest Suffolk County. They've got salt, they got sand, and they've got mulch. And they've got snow blowers, and they are Long Island's largest rock salt source, along with, why shouldn't you be surprised, they've got tons of snow melt products. They just do. Mag, ice, pellets, and flakes, and Pelledo. So be prepared, because there's still about 8 more weeks to go here. 631-756-1125 for the best prices anywhere. The website is
OmniTrueValue.com. And Joe, I had to chuckle when you said that, because this is the antithesis. This is the opposite of a winter I could remember maybe 5 or 7 years ago, where we had one storm after another storm after another storm, and more ice than snow than anything else. And I was in desperate need. There was a huge area of ice on my driveway. So I went to the local Home Depot, went up to one of the guys in the orange aprons, and I said, could you tell me where the ice or snow melt is? And the guy looked at me and he said, I could tell you where it was.
Yeah.
And now, of course, there's more of that stuff than you could possibly imagine, possibly hope for.
The businesses that deal with all of that stuff, they're having a famine year, but what can you do? It is what it is. I am, of course, wearing my buddy Junior sent me from the Office of Emergency Management in Bayonne, New Jersey. Bay 1 with an extra, Bayonne. Bay 1 with an extra N in it, but I got my hat and I got my sweatshirt, and I actually have a nice black polo shirt too. Thank you, Junior, and thanks to all the folks over at the Bayonne Office of Emergency Management in Bayonne in, where do you think it is, Joe?
New Guernsey.
Yes, in Bayonne, New Jersey. Correct.
And you talk about emergency management. We have a celebrity on the chat board today.
Who?
Our own Dennis Cassia. Dennis has, for those of you who are unaware, Dennis, for a good number of years, has been a firefighter. He lives out currently in Connecticut, and he was, as of yesterday, I found out from his wife, Kim, that he has been nominated and elected to the Connecticut, the Firefighters Hall of Fame, and the ceremony is going to be held April the 6th of this year. And Dennis was telling me this is about as big for somebody in his line of work as somebody who wins the Emmy or gets his article on the cover of one of the local astronomy magazines or whatever. Big deal. So congratulations to Dennis for being a Hall of Famer in firefighting, and I'm sure all of us are proud of Dennis this morning.
That we are. Congratulations to Dennis.
Yes.
And welcome to everybody on the chat board on this Sunday morning. You're drinking your tea or your coffee. Joe's got his tea. I have my water. I already went through my coffee earlier today. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, and you'll never miss the Joe and Joe Weather Show, which is on today, on Sundays, usually at 11 a.m., and Monday through Thursday, usually at 7:35 p.m. Eastern Time. We take Fridays and Saturdays off so that we can mentally recharge, unless there's a storm going on in the Northeast, in which case we will cover it for you and move our day off to some other spot. So, and turn the notifications on so you don't miss it. So, I am, hang on just a second. I forgot to bring it with me. No, I have. It's not very clean because it's got to go in the wash. But here's my towel, okay, and I'm about to throw in the towel. I'm about to throw in the towel, Joe, and maybe, just maybe, if I throw in the towel, that will magically change things in the atmosphere. But I have to tell you, I looked at stuff very carefully all through the last couple of days that we've been off. A lot of the long range models, tools, and ensembles, and everything else, and I come back to those two phrases that I like to fall back on. Well, one is a phrase, one phrase. The other one is an observation. The phrase that be careful because the pattern change you want and the pattern change you get may not necessarily be the same thing. And the observation part of it is that we can go from having a terrible pattern across North America to a new pattern across North America that might wind up being every bit as terrible for winter weather lovers, at least in the coastal Northeast. And I looked at all the stuff, Joe. I'm getting pretty discouraged from a winter weather standpoint. Although I got to tell you, I wasn't here for it, but apparently Friday night into Saturday morning, it has snowed here for the fourth time. We had a coating to an inch. Everything was iced up here on Saturday morning. There were a lot of accidents on the main road. We only on the main roads. We really only have two main roads around here. So, so no, three. Three. I'm sorry, three.
The one that goes to Pixley.
Right.
The one that goes.
One that goes to Hooterville. The other one that goes to Pixley, and the other one is the escape route to Atlanta. I'm kidding. I love it up here. It's just really beautiful. But I just, from what I've been looking at, we're gonna. I can just feel it, Joe. We're gonna wind up getting a pattern change, and it's gonna just go from this fire hose pattern is gonna go away, which is great for California because they could finally get some relief from all these big storms. And then we're gonna set up with a new pattern that I think may wind up being almost as bad.
Yeah.
For winter weather lovers. Wonderful if you don't like winter weather. Wonderful if you want a low heating oil bill. Okay.
Right.
So I don't know.
I was showing Renata late last night on the GFS, the 10 millibar over the Northern Hemisphere. And by the end of this month, by the end of January, I was like doing a double take. I mean, the entire country, the entire continent of North America is underneath hardly any kind of a flow at all. And a lot more in the way of beige or orange as opposed to that deep shade of blue that you'd want to see.
See, here's the thing though. I'm still not sure. I don't know whether the polar vortex setup is a bearish one. I'm looking at what people that really deal with that. They are saying that it's bullish the way that the polar vortex is pulling up, and that we're going to have a weak flow in the stratosphere because supposedly it's supposed to be the opposite of that in the lower atmosphere. I just don't know whether it couples. I don't quite understand how what goes on up there affects what goes on down here. I think it's just going to be. I think there's going to be cold air. I just think that it's going to be going. Cold air is going to be up there in Canada again, and so I just think that it's going to wind up going in the west because the trough wants to set up down the Rockies, which puts the southeast ridge in play along the east coast. And that's from what I saw. I just don't know. I'm still not sure how all that stuff that goes on in the stratosphere, translates to everything that goes on downstairs.
I don't either. I've been looking at Dr. Judith Cohen's tweets over the last few days, and I got to tell you, I'm kind of confused. I mean, he is talking in a way that suggests that no, don't give up. There's still the most recent tweet showed what he called cratering of snow levels across Eurasia, and how that
Yes.
might be a good thing for North. But really, he's talking in a manner, or he's mentioning things that I don't really
No,
understand.
neither do I. To be fair, I mean it's way above but I think it's way above our pay grade.
Right, right. I know Cecilia Hernandez on the chat board is saying, "Wait, didn't you read Dr. Cohen's latest information? And don't you believe that he still thinks that?" And I say, "Yeah, I'm reading it, but I really, here I am. I've been in the business for 40 plus years. I don't really understand
I don't get it.
what he's saying. I don't get
Yeah,
it. I don't."
and you know what? It's fine. It's like I see posts on Twitter from other people, and they're putting up all these graphs and things, and I don't know. My almost 64-year-old brain doesn't want to absorb all that. By the way, we went from record snow cover in North America at the end of December, okay, to almost record lack of snow cover in North America and in parts of Canada because of how warm it's been.
Right,
And there was a tweet from Dr. Cohen, at least when it comes to Eurasian snow, that there too, the warm weather in Europe really has eaten away at all the snow cover, but now apparently it's starting to rebuild again. Um, I Then I see a couple of runs over the last few days of the 10 millibar where the polar vortex actually splits in two. So maybe that's what he's counting on, that the runs where you have the one vortex just kind of, pivoting around and going up, lining up from Europe across to Siberia, and a big upper high in the stratosphere sitting over North America, as opposed to having the vortex split in two. Look, either way, if it boils down to this for me, either way, and that is, if the trough winds up setting at 100 or 110 degrees west, you can kiss the next 3 or 4 weeks goodbye.
right, right.
I mean,
Yeah,
unless unless you get something in that general scope of a pattern, and it's possible where you get a cold high that kind of breaks away and slides across the Great Lakes and Northeast, and you could time it with something coming out of the Southwest where you get into some overrunning. I think the Europeans just sort of implied that for something out a week from now, but to me that's like grasping at straws at this point.
right. Yeah. I I've looked and I've looked and I've looked again, trying to find something. The only thing I could find really is that maybe by the end of the month, the 500 millibar pattern looks favorable, or is starting to look favorable. It looks more favorable for the west. Here in the east, it still looks like it's going to be above normal. Save for what happened last night and this morning. I mean, it downright feels like January this morning. Maybe
Yeah.
more so because of the wind. We had some very potent winds last night. They had to be gusting over 30 miles an hour all through the course of the night. They seem to have slackened off a little bit this morning, but I went out to get the newspaper and came running back in. I said, boy, this is not like any of the days that we've seen so far this year. I think yesterday, for the first time this year, not for the season, but for the first time this year of 2023, Central Park actually dropped or hit 32, freezing.
How crazy is that? I was 18 this morning here.
Isn't that amazing?
And I was in Mississippi where it was cold yesterday and on Friday. I came back yesterday evening, so I didn't. It was already dark, but I went out this morning. I could see I still had a few patches of snow on my deck, and then I saw some, local town folks that put up pictures from yesterday to verify what I'd said earlier about the snow here. So it's the fourth time I've seen snow here, and I would venture to say that if I average the temperatures out for the period from October to now, I bet you it's not that much higher than if I averaged out, say, the temperatures for New York City for the same time frame. Because I had a cold October here, and I went below zero right before Christmas. And in the meantime, by the way, I've put up this satellite loop, and overnight, you could see it on the first couple of frames. I'm going to add some frames to this because when I first looked at it, I got up early this morning. I was up at 5, and I
Huh.
looked at this on the infrared, and I was blown away by the core of this low, Joe.
Well, look,
Take a look at this. I mean, almost completely separate. There were lightning strikes all around the center last night. I mean, is this subtropical?
well, it kind of reminds me of a few storms we've seen over the years, like, for example, the President's Day storm, 1979, which also had lots of convection around it and also had sort of a tropical-like eye. And this one certainly looks like it has an eye. But you got to also understand, Joe. I know you do, and a lot of the people on the chat board. But I mean, my God, it's been such a warm winter that Gulf Stream must be much higher temperature-wise than normal. So all you have to do is move any kind of a disturbance over it, and bang, that thing is going to go and fly. And that certainly is the case here.
I got two comments here not on the chat board though, from my subscription site on Patreon. Tom says, last night while driving along the New Jersey border with New York City, I saw a few white things blowing around in the wind. Somebody told me that, quote unquote, back in the day, they called that snowflakes.
Yeah.
And he says, enjoy your weekend. And Justin King, who is on my platform from Maine, says finally 8 inches of solid snow on the ground here and a couple more tonight and some more hopefully at the end of the week. Maine feels like Maine again. He was pointing out to me, he messaged me a week or so ago about the fact that where he is in Maine, and he's not really on the coast, just bare ground. I mean, which is in Maine in the wintertime to have bare ground is almost unheard of.
Right, right. And this pattern sort of reminds me of the winter of 72, 73, where in New York, we ended up with an all-time low of 2.8 inches of snow for the entire season at Central Park. But meanwhile, places to the north of us, places to the south of us, places to the west of us, were getting hit. Not all the time, but I mean, you'd hear about a big snowstorm dumping 6 to 10 inches on Maryland or Delaware to the south, and we'd get hardly anything, maybe a few flurries. I mean, by the end of that winter, and I was a real snow weenie back then. I was so frustrated. I just couldn't believe it. Like, at every chance that we had, it found a way to miss us. And here today, tonight, tomorrow, we have a storm, which we just saw offshore, that will backlash or backwash much of eastern and central New England with snow. Not a ton of snow, but enough snow to make it look like January.
Yeah,
And
I
meanwhile,
mean, you basically, if you draw a line from Boston to Providence to maybe East Hampton on Long Island eastward, from there east, there already has been some snow on the radar. Meanwhile, it's on the west side. The clouds on the loop, Joe, are backing westward, so it's gotten overcast pretty much over most of Long Island, not quite all of it, but most of it. And now the back edge is to the Nassau-Queens line, and on the Connecticut side, the cloud lines moved pretty rapidly, and it's now west of 91 in Hartford and on its way into Litchfield County. And meanwhile, across much of New Jersey, except for the immediate coast of Pennsylvania, down into Virginia, North Carolina, go on the wider loop, you can see it here. It is a really nice day, beautiful sunshine there. And meanwhile, also in the west, we've got a big rotation off the coast of Oregon and moisture that's coming in for central and southern California, moving into Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah. That saga continues for a little while longer there in the west.
And I'm wondering, some of the models with this system today, tonight, tomorrow have been really doing weird things. I mean, I've seen places like on Cape Cod where 8 inches of snow possible or 6 inches of snow. Now, I took a look at the probabilistic winter precipitation guidance from WPC, and they have snow for, portions of eastern Massachusetts, maybe an inch or two possible between now and tomorrow morning. Although places like Cape Cod, Nantucket, and Martha's Vineyard are devoid of any precipitation, any kind of snow. And I'm kind of scratching my head and wondering, maybe they think that in those localities it's going to be too warm, and maybe they're going to have more sleet or rain as opposed to snow.
I looked at the obs a couple of hours ago. It was raining at Cape Cod, okay, but it was snowing as you go, west toward the mainland. And
Right.
you speak of WPC's probability map, so I did put it up. This is the probability of at least 2. And the dark green is 20 to 30%. I'm sorry, the dark green is 30 to 40%. The dark blue is 40 to 50, and then the 50 plus is the lighter blue, which they have a small area there. Boston's in the 40 to 50. And Plymouth, Mass, is in the 50 to 60, but it's a very, very small area. And then it kind of, tails off as you go south and east. And it also increases coastal Maine and then goes up in a big way, much higher as you head up into central and northern Maine, where we're talking a 70 to 80% chance of at least 2 over the next 72 hours. This is about as close as we've gotten to using this map. Certainly any time in the last 2 weeks in the Northeast, except for up into upstate New York and Maine, it's just been that uneventful.
I actually went beyond that. I went to at least 6 inches probability, and there's a big swath of brown, which indicates 1 to 5%, but still it's there. I mean, the same kind of probabilities as you or I would have gotten for winning the Mega Millions the other night, but still the probability is there for portions of western Cape Cod and up to about Brockton, Massachusetts, and down to Plymouth. So, I mean, it would not be out of the question uh, if everything were to fall into place that you could see like a healthy half foot of snow, but everything would have to fall into place. But at least in those regions, they're going to pick up maybe an inch or two of the white stuff, which is a hell of a lot more than like what even I've seen.
Right.
I mean, I saw Joe here in Putnam Valley, December the 4th. And I actually put gas in my snowblower with the anticipation that we would get, several inches. Instead, we ended up with like 1 inch, one lousy inch of snow, which was gone the following day. We've had nothing. And I mentioned this last week. I did some checking. And I think back in 2007, I actually went all the way to Valentine's Day without having to use my snowblower. By then, we ended up on Valentine's Day of 2007 with 3 or 4 inches of snow and sleet, and I had to break the machine out then. But this is ridiculous. This is really amazing that we've gone this far. And don't forget now, at Central Park, January 29th, that's 2 weeks from today. 2 weeks from today. And actually, back in 1973, it was also a Sunday. January 29th, 1973 was the latest that New York City saw measurable snow at Central Park, 1.8 inches. So we've got 2 more weeks to go to get to that milestone. And I got to tell you something. If I had some money and if Las Vegas were taking bets, I'd put some money down.
Oh yeah,
we're gonna get to there.
The trend is your friend. It's going to have to take something of importance to really break this. I got the Pivotal Weather's snowfall forecast maps. I mean, what the hell? We might as well use them. So this is the NAM today, which has 8.2 inches, Joe, for Barnstable, 1 inch for Boston. But, forget the number so much. You could see the highlight of where they have the max snowfall. It kind of makes sense. Half an inch for Providence and just like maybe a couple of tenths over eastern Long Island. That is the NAM. So let's look at the HRRR. And this will be the 12Z HRRR, which, of course, we know how reliable the HRRR is. This one gives Boston almost 5 inches. Lowell, Mass, 2.9. Worcester, 0.9. Okay. It actually brings 1 inch or 2 to the South Fork, with 1 inch going back maybe to about between Bridgehampton and East Hampton, and then looks like Montauk gets 2 or 3 inches. Barnstable 7.2, and um, uh, on the HRRR, there's a stripe in a little bit further to the north and west of there where we're seeing amounts in the double digits. This is the kind of thing where something like that could happen, but you know what? You gotta basically just sit there and watch the obs hour by hour and minute by minute to figure that one out. And the European from last night. Oh, wrong European. I'm sorry. I got to set the whole thing up again. Just give me a moment here. So the European from last night on its forecast gave let's see 10 to 1. Again, this is pivotal weather. And so last night's 0Z run, Joe, gave Barnstable 11.1, Providence 2.5, Boston 3.7 on the 0Z, and on the 6Z it gave 3.1 for Boston, 3.9 for Providence, 8.3 for Barnstable. Had a much larger area of 6 inches plus on the European. So, and actually on the European also, the back edge of an inch goes a little bit further to the west, not quite to Riverhead, but does cover most of the South Fork, and Montauk gets like 4 inches out of this. So, you know, this is one where if you're a forecaster, you're watching the radar, you're watching the observations, and you're basically doing it by hand. Okay, at this point, who cares what the models show? And you can see on the radar, there's a nice arc there. There's this arm that's just coming around on the backside of this storm.
Right, and literally backlashing or backwashing parts of New England, and maybe as far west as parts of extreme eastern Long Island. But I said it's interesting how the folks at WPC are thinking along the lines of maybe an inch or two at most for snow accumulations, whereas there are some models that, as you pointed out, Joe, like the NAM and like the HRRR, are going like 4, 6, 8 inches for portions of Massachusetts.
I think the way that happens is because the amount of cold air is minimal. I don't think we can argue that the amount of cold air is minimal. If you get a band of really intense precip that really cools down the bottom part of the atmosphere and sits over a spot for a while, that's probably how you could get somebody gets a jackpot of 5 or 6 inches. I wouldn't feel confident about putting that out in a forecast at all. That this is not the sort of system that you want to be a hero for from the standpoint of a forecast.
And besides that, it's not as problematic for a Monday morning as it might normally be because, of course, tomorrow morning, all day tomorrow is a holiday. So the schools will be closed, and there may be a few places. I mean, it's a federal holiday, so post offices won't be running. You won't have the mail trucks on the road. So it may be problematic if you have to work and get up early tomorrow morning in the Boston area and weave through the snowflakes, but it won't be quite as bad as if you had the school kids out and the mail trucks out and this buck and blah, 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 blah. It's a holiday. So if you're watching us in New England, eastern New England, just relax, look out the window, and enjoy the snow.
Right. We've got precip in parts of the Southwest, from West Texas all the way back to Southern California. You can see it's kind of blotchy. There's not everywhere, but it's there. And also up in the Pacific Northwest where we've got some rain going on in Washington State. We do have some winter weather advisories that are up in the Northeast. You can't see it on this map, but there are winter weather advisories up from the Cape to just south of Boston, right along the immediate coast. And then we have winter weather advisories up for much of Maine, except for the Southwest, and winter storm warnings for, I guess that's down east Maine, southeastern Maine. The winter storm warnings are up there because they're not only going to get this arm coming back, but there's actually going to be eventually warm air coming in from the east as the cold air gets spent. Warm air comes in from the east and changes it over to sleet and freezing rain. Meanwhile, in the southwest, we've got a bunch of winter storm warnings in New Mexico, in Arizona, probably including Flagstaff, in Utah, in areas close to Salt Lake City, right, cutting the state up and down right in the middle. The Sierra Nevadas, and also parts of southwestern Nevada. I was thinking about this morning, Joe, with the kind of pattern that we could possibly envision. I bet you that they see snow in places not too far from San Francisco, not too far from Los Angeles, not too far from Las Vegas. That they see measurable snow in the next couple when the pattern finishes changing toward the end of the month and for however long that lasts. I bet you they see it there before you see it here in places like Washington, D.C., New York City, Philadelphia.
I would agree with you. I would absolutely agree with you. Izzy D. Well, first of all, thank you to Robert Russo for hitting super chats, and Izzy D on the chat board saying it was so exciting to see snowflakes for what feels like the first time in years. Yesterday, Rockland County, New York. New Hempstead, I guess it's Hempstead, not Hampstead, was actually a snow shower up enough to put down a dusting in the shade in the morning. And on my deck here in Putnam Valley, when I woke up yesterday morning and looked down on the deck was white. Yeah, it was. In fact, there was more. And Dennis Cassie also sent me a message. It was more grapple than snowy on colder surfaces, but it was exciting to see snow falling, big flakes yesterday for a while in the early part of the day. At some point, snowing light to moderately. Wasn't sticking, but snowing light to moderately. Yeah. So it was exciting. This is the famous Cioffi version of a cheap thrill. Yeah. It was a cheap thrill yesterday.
Well, I got to when I left Friday morning, because I didn't leave till after 8 o'clock in the morning. It had changed. It had changed over to snow here, so I did get to see that. I did not get to see the beautiful coating or take pictures that I would have had yesterday morning because I didn't get back till last night. WPC's 2-inch plus probabilities out in the west. You could see they're high across southern Nevada, Utah, Arizona, northwest New Mexico, the Sierra Nevadas, and even in a few places north and east of Los Angeles are some of the mountains there. And I'll just put up the probability for at least 8. And there's some areas here in Utah and in Arizona and in southern Colorado that could wind up doing pretty well out this, and also some areas up in the Cascades where the probability of at least 8 is sitting up at 50%. Now, the long range, Mr. Rayo, for Wednesday into Thursday has the area in eastern Colorado, the light green is 10 to 30. So let's just make it easy. This is the probability for at least 3. The blue is 50 to 70%. That's northern Kansas, southeast Nebraska, northwest Mizzou, and southwestern Iowa. And then as we move on to Thursday into Friday, they actually have the southern edge of 10 to 30, cutting across Pennsylvania roughly in half, and then it kind of nudges into northwest New Jersey, the Hudson Valley, almost to where you are. You're on the southern edge of that. All of Connecticut, Rhode Island. 30 to 50 is up near Albany and points north. 50 to 70 is up from Saratoga and points north, Glens Falls. And then on up into Vermont, New Hampshire, and into Maine, it's 50 to 70. I don't know. I'm not, I wasn't overly excited by anything at the end of the week. Saturday, it goes up to Maine, where there's a high probability of at least 3. And then on Sunday, there's a high probability next Saturday into Sunday that nobody is going to see any snow east of the Rockies. That's not exactly breaking news.
Oh, by the way, do you remember it was 10 days ago that a couple of local forecasters here were saying we're going to have to watch that forecast on Sunday the 15th because it may very well be that we'll have a nor'easter and maybe some snow. At 10 days ago, I was mocking them for doing that. But in retrospect, I have to give at least some partial credit because indeed there is a major system that we led off the show with, and it is going to be hitting portions of eastern New England. But for us here in the New York area, you couldn't have a brighter and more sunnier day than what we have out there right now.
Right. All right. So just to go back to what I was saying at the beginning of the show, why I've become suddenly, Mr. Grinch when it comes to the next pattern that we evolve into. And I'm going to just jump back to the 0Z run from last night and show you why. So here's your fire hose, Saturday into Sunday. I think it's pretty obvious when you look at the Pacific. You've got this fire hose jet running right across into the west. Here's your storm off the east coast. Here's the storm that's sitting off the coast of Oregon this morning. And there's your upper flow. The flow in Canada is pretty much from west to east up in northern Canada. You really have to go up way up north to find any real cold air. So what happens? Well, going forward, our east coast system pulls out somewhat. It's actually rotating underneath a building upper high from Newfoundland into Labrador. So it's kind of trapped there, which means that this next energy that's now come into the Pacific and moving through the Southwest, there's no room for it. It's going to start to come into under the influence of the storm to the east and the higher pressures to the north in the upper atmosphere that system's just going to basically weaken and fall apart as it comes eastward. That's why I don't think, the system for Tuesday is any big deal. Then you have more energy coming for Thursday, coming out from the west on Wednesday. And again, not much cold air around, and it's coming into a ridge position. This one actually holds on a little bit longer as a short wave that moves on through, and you see it go by there. And meanwhile, another system drops down in the southwest. Now, at the point we're at late this week, the fire hose is just about gone. There's a ridge building off the California coast and more troughing across North America. You're starting to see Canada beginning to loosen up here with the flow and trying to establish some kind of a jet a little bit further to the south, but it doesn't have much success because if you look off the Florida East Coast, there's an east-west ridge there that is holding firm, and the trough drops down in the west and then drops down more in the west. You see what I'm getting at here, Joe? If you got the pattern changes, especially in the western part of the United States, but all the troughing is out there. It's out the big high. See that at this point in 10 days, you've got what looks like the beginning of a negative East Pacific oscillation signal. Instead, energy breaks that down, shifts the high more toward the Aleutians and up into Alaska. That's not good for the East.
Right.
For cold air. Now, there is a cold connection here toward the end of the period on the overnight run. And also, it's very blocky very blocky now east of Greenland. I saw this last night and I thought, okay, well, that's actually not too shabby looking at 500 if you want winter weather. But that's been the exception lately. The rule has been what the 6Z has done. Has shown up more and did yesterday. Look where the trough drops in the west. How are you going to get cold with that? Yeah, it's going to be cold. It's going to be cold in the Pacific Northwest. It's going to be cold in the Southwest. It's going to be cold in the Western Plains and the Northern and in the Rockies. But in the East, it's like, eh.
Well, that's what the Climate Prediction Center has been saying in their the last several days in the 6 to 10 day outlooks. They've had a broad area, almost centered on the desert southwest, of below normal temperature probabilities. That's where the cold air presumably is going to be. But here in the east, it still is maintaining above normal, at least through not just the next 6 to 10 days, but even for the next couple of weeks. And even the experimental, I should bring the experimental up. If you want to share, let me share this.
Sure.
The experimental 3 to 4 week probability.
Just a second. Just give me a moment here. Okay.
Right.
And okay, where are you? Go ahead. It's all yours.
All right. Oh, hold on for a second. Let me just get it up.
Ooh.
Here and up and there, and boom. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Climate Prediction Center's 3 to 4 week experimental. They've been experimental now for 5 years. I'm wondering when the heck they finally going to say, okay, we've experimented enough. This is now.
It's a budget issue.
Yeah.
They probably are paying for this out of a budget that says experimental, and they can't get approval for putting it in a budget that says not experimental.
Whatever. Well, no matter which way.
It's the federal government. That's how they work.
You want to slice it. It says this latest experimental, which comes out on Friday afternoons, shows you that places to the west of the Mississippi, generally west of the Mississippi, we're not talking about folks who live, let's say, down in southern Texas, but I mean, like, here's where all the below normal temperatures are presumably going to be into the first week or the first week and a half of February. And look at this. Here in the east, we have above normal all the way up and down the eastern seaboard, particularly so down across the southeastern part of the country, where it's 60 to 70% probability of above normal temperatures. And there you go. And that has not changed. There has not been any kind of significant change in this pattern overall since Christmas, when we had that frigidly cold air spill down over the eastern half of the country. Ever since, it has warmed up remarkably, and it continues to do that right on, apparently, according to this, into February. Let me just show you here. This was the latest 6 to 10 day temperature outlook. And as Joe was saying, with all that troughiness in the west, yeah, it's going to get colder out in the western half of the country, and especially so in where is that now? That's northeastern Arizona and northwestern New Mexico, extreme southeastern Utah, and southwestern Colorado.
Isn't that Four Corners?
The Four Corners area. That's right.
Yes.
That's right. So we got what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So right here in that darkest shade of blue, 80 to 90% probability of below normal temperatures. Meanwhile, here in the east, we continue to bask from the 20th to the 24th of January in, well above normal probabilities for temperatures. Let's show you the 8 to 14 day. Any change? No, not really. Still below normal out here in the Four Corners area, and here in the east, it continues to be, especially so right along the Atlantic seaboard, above normal in terms of. In fact, let me just check here. All right, yeah. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4. So you've got 60 to 70% probability right at the central coastal area of Florida of above normal temperatures, and 50 to 60% up here in New York. It ain't changing, Joe, at least according to the Climate Prediction Center. This is from January 22nd through almost the end of the month, January 28th.
I want to, because I forgot to, maybe I did it at the beginning of the show. I don't remember, but if I guess I did, Sal Pachi hitting super chat at the start of the show. Thank you, Sal. Very generous of you and most appreciated. I didn't want to leave you out, so thank you very much for doing that. I'm looking at the GFS here, the new GFS, which has just come out, and of course you see the coastal low in the east kind of back arms that snow, especially into Maine, and you see the pink and the purple, so that's sleet and freezing rain, and then it goes back to snow that sweeps in again as warm air that's going to come in from the east. There's not a lot of cold air around at all, so that goes out, and then of course, as we said, you got 3 of these systems showing up on the map here on Monday afternoon. So you got the coastal low east of Maine. The next low is in Iowa. There's more energy now that's now moved into the southwest. So that's 1, 2, 3. And as we move along, the system in the middle.
We need maps, by the way, Joe.
Thank you. As soon as you started talking, I said, "Oh, I forgot to put the maps up." So you didn't miss much. He caught me early. this time around. So anyway, there you go. 1, 2, 3, right there. It's like a train of them here. And the first one taking longer to get out of the way. So what happens? That second low in Iowa just kind of falls apart. Maybe we get a little bit of precip here during Tuesday into Tuesday night, and then that goes away. Then the next one comes out. You see it there on the Oklahoma Panhandle. That runs up toward Iowa, but of course, minimal cold air behind the system on Tuesday, so it's mostly rain, maybe a little bit of snow up in Vermont, New Hampshire, and then that goes out. Now, this one here, the third one that's coming out of the Gulf states a week from today, this is one that the European last night was trying to suggest that maybe there would be a little bit more cold air in the east and that it gets shoved out underneath us with some maybe some blockiness going on, starting to develop up into the North Atlantic. The GFS still holds on to a primary that goes up to Chicago, but I would, if you want to hold out hope for this, you can. But for now, it doesn't look promising, but we'll see. And then that goes out. Then there's just kind of a slightly colder look to things. But here comes the next one on the 25th, and guess where that one's going? To the lakes. And then that goes out. So you basically have 4 weather systems that are going to try to cut to the west with not that much in the way of cold air until the very end of the period. I'm sorry. It's only out to 276. So we're at day 11, day 12, and there's actually a cold high with 504 thicknesses approaching northern Minnesota at that point. And I noticed, Joe, too, when you look at the upper air on this day run, it's not terrible, okay? At least through the day 11 and 12, the trough has not dropped back into the west yet. And by the way, you can see what's going on up in the North Atlantic, which I suppose you could be encouraged by, is this ridge that's building up from the Azores right into Greenland over the top, and then you've got a blocking high just north of Alaska that's coming over from the other side. So, I mean, this is not terrible, but I want to see beyond this to see if ultimately we wind up with a trough that's like this, in which case, as I said, it'll snow in places not too far from San Francisco, Los Angeles, Las Vegas, before it snows in New York and Philadelphia and Washington and Baltimore.
Right. Well, don't hold your breath.
No, I'm not going to hold my breath. What are we out to? 270 on this. So we're out to 12 days. So, like I said, I wanted to throw the towel in at the beginning of the show. It's very hard for me to do that. I try not to get caught up in the emotion that a lot of people that are weather enthusiasts get caught up in, and it hasn't snowed. If it doesn't snow every day from November 1st to May 30, from Halloween to Memorial Day, it's got to snow every day. Otherwise, the winter is a disappointment. If it doesn't do that, I try not to get caught up in it. But it's hard not to just get completely frustrated, even if you are, you're not wish casting. You're trying to do your job. But the little boy in you wants to see snow, or the little girl in you wants to see snow, and the models are doing what they're doing. One run, it gives you hope. The next one, it's despair. Hope and despair, back and forth.
Adam Lowe is talking on the chat board to Lucia Hernandez and talking about blowtorch winters. And he mentions the winter of 96, 97, blowtorch winter, but we did get a spring snowstorm, no storm till April 1st, and then we got 24 inches. I remember that very well, Joe. In fact, I did not live up here in 1997 April when they had that April Fool's snowstorm, although many places in northern Westchester and Putnam and surrounding areas did not have power for many, many, many days because of the very heavy, wet snowfall that fell on that particular day. That was one for the books. A lot of snow lovers were suffering through much of the winter season, and then all of a sudden, bingo! April the 1st came, and all of that snow fell. Even some wet snow down in New York, although it really didn't accumulate to all that much.
Yep. Okay. Well, you know what? It's a Sunday morning for another 6 minutes. So I think we will just call it a day. And guess what? Joe and I will be back tomorrow at 7:35 p.m. Eastern Time.
That's right. We will be here, barring any earthquake or asteroidal collision. We'll be
Yes.
here.
And the Joe and Joe Weather Show brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. Everything you need for the winter, for the spring, for the summer. Maybe you want to get started early on spring. Why not? 631-756-1125 for the best prices anywhere. The website is
OmniTrueValue.com. And we're going to continue to run that slide. We are getting ready until it's time that we actually get something.
I know. So, all right. So anyhow, we'll see everybody. We'll see you. Happy birthday to my daughter Lauren. She's today. It's a because. Yeah. So anyway, my firstborn child. So happy birthday to her. Hope you have a great day.
And Izzy D, to just answer your question, what happened to Briller Jeopardy? Scott Briller taking care of his mom, who suffered a bit of a setback. So we all wish her well. Hopefully everything will go all right. And once she is back on her feet and once she is back in good health, Scott will return. And I'm sure that he will have a plethora of Briller Jeopardies to throw at us in the days and weeks to come.
Yes,
today.
All our best to Scott and to Mother Briller. Get well soon, and we will see you tomorrow. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.